So Annalisa, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me and the students at the University of Waterloo. You have a unique perspective as the Secretary General of EuroCities, representing and understanding the views that the cities have inside Europe. So I thought I would start by just asking you to tell the students about the EuroCities organization, who your members are, what you do, and what your role is.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this. I'm very, very honored to be able to give my perspective towards a group in another country, a country like Canada. It's like it reminds me when I came, a very civilized country. Anyway, so who we are and what we do and so on as EuroCities. I mean, the word, the title, the name of this organization speaks, very clearly. So we are actually the biggest network of cities in Europe. We group the city governments. So it's basically city administration, city governments with their leaders, political leaders. We group the city governments of nearly 200, 198 cities across 39 countries. So it's not only the EU, it's really Europe in a larger sense. So we have Turkey, we have the Balkans, we have even Georgia, Ukraine, and so on. So it's a sort of bigger approach. And of course, all those countries that are not part of the EU in stricto sensu, but like Norway, Iceland, and so on, Switzerland, and now the UK, of course. So in a way, with all the cities we have, because the majority of our cities are big, not in the size or in the scale that you have in your country, but in the European scale, we have something like 150 cities that have more than 250,000 inhabitants, and for us, this is already a big city. And let's say another 50 that have less, so they are medium to small cities, but which are still interesting to have in because innovation is looked at in a different way, even if the challenges I think are more or less the same. But still, so we have from Paris, London, and Berlin, and Rome, and all these big cities to cities of 100,000, something like that. So basically, what I was saying before is that by having all these cities as members, we cover, maybe we can say that, a population of around 130 million people. So I would say we are quite, representative in a way, because the people who are elected there and the people who administer those governments still have a link with their population. So yeah, what do we do? Basically, our purpose, our mission is to help those cities to do better their work, to transform their own realities, urban and metropolitan realities, to make them more sustainable, more livable, to make sure that cities and the people are, that the citizens have a good quality of life, and they live a good life, and the city is a good place to work, live, play, move around, and so on. So basically, the idea is to be a tool for them to reach their goal. And how do we do it? Therefore, we do it by working together, so creating a platform for these cities to exchange among themselves, to share the knowledge, inspire each other exactly on how best to tackle the different challenges that they face on a daily basis and on the long term. And on the other side is about creating an EU legal policy funding framework that is supportive of those goals, and of these efforts by urban authorities. And in this respect, we work as the voice of cities in Europe, and we work in contact on a permanent basis with the European institutions to convey the messages of urban authorities. So yeah, that's what we do. We do it through, meetings, basically meetings, I have to say, communication, peer learning moments, but it's very much meetings. That's why the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted in a huge way. We had to be even more resilient because all our activities the majority of our activities were physical, exactly because it's 30 years that, it's a series of communities that have been meeting physically and creating these bonds, and in many ways also friendship and sort of really very this very strong peer relation. And therefore, yeah, it's an organization that does this. Of course, we have sectorial communities, like the people that in city administrations work on mobility, those that work on social affairs, those that work on environment, those that work on digital, those that work on culture and on economy and so on. So it's sectorials, but it's true that because we reflect basically the organization of these public sector authorities, which are very much in silos, unluckily. But okay, that's a problem of many many organizations. But more and more, of course, the reality out there is, demanding approaches that are cross-cutting, that are more complex, and therefore more, integrated, systemic, and so on. So we are also trying to move in that direction with our, services and activities to support these kind of transformations, which are more and more complex. So that's so it's a community of, over 10,000, 20,000, I can't really, but a big number of practitioners from different, imagine the person in charge of noise policy, from 200 cities across Europe, you multiply that with all the areas in which, they connect to each other. And so it's a big community of practitioners, a big community of mayors, city leaders, councillors, and so on. And we have a team in Brussels of around 50 people. We do also European projects. We combine as income, we combine fees from our members with European projects that give us grants to reinforce some of our activities. But if you go on www.eurocities.eu, you will find everything about us. You will hear about all the stories on cities pre and post COVID, and in any case, I'm at your disposal even in the future to get any details on the organization as such.
Thank you. And I looked at the EuroCities website, and I would certainly echo what you've got to say about it being a rich resource that students can go to understand more about what's happening in Europe, in cities in particular.
Okay, good.
As you have worked, and as you do work with all of the cities you work with, you'll be able to have a unique view in many ways of the challenges that they face and what it might mean to have a good city. What is the vision that you might have of that?
Yeah, it's true that every city is different. They has a different DNA, has a different, history and so on. But at the end of the day, I think the challenges are the same everywhere. They differ in terms of, how do you say, seriousness or degree of, gravity. I don't know if you say that, or, they nuance and so on. Of course, you can't compare, traffic congestion in a city like Paris with a very small city in Finland that is less densely populated or things like that. But still, I would say that there are some challenges that we have in a way compiled around also our strategic framework, because and they in a way they, by looking at the challenges and by saying by finding solutions to these challenges, you create in a way the good city. And I would say the good European city, because it's quite, there isn't one city fits all, but there is a sort of some sort of model that can be in a way created or analyzed. So I would say for sure let's say a good city has to be an inclusive city. And I would say, I mean, these are also challenges that can apply to the world. I have to say that's true, but some are very specific for Europe. But anyway, so a good city is an inclusive city, so that able to tackle issues like high poverty and social exclusion. That is able to give a roof to everyone, but an affordable roof, because there's a lot about social housing and so on. It's not only social housing, it's also about affordable housing, even to people who have a job or who are not, who are okay in terms of income, but they are obliged to live, I don't know how many kilometers from their work because they cannot afford. So all the sort of, speculative policies around housing in many big cities is a big challenge, and of course homelessness. That's a big challenge. All the, of course, area of education and training. There's nothing to say there. We are in the right place there. The integration of migrants. I mean, migration is a global phenomenon, but is dealt with and managed and organized at the local level. It happens at the local level. So, having strong policies, positive policies of integration, welcoming, and so on in cities is a fundamental thing. As a fundamental policy, is a fundamental challenge to tackle. And of course, all the aspects around solidarity, volunteering, which is such a richness, and we've seen that during the pandemic. If we didn't have so much solidarity and all the work that and all the contribution and volunteering is providing to the issues I mentioned before, like poverty or homelessness, is so it needs a good city is a city that nurture that type of work, and force in society. Then I would say a good city is and we call it prosperous city. I mean, a city where everyone can have a job and a decent job. So, and where the market is local, and it's functioning well, where the sort of framework for investments is positive, and where the local administration and the city government and so on can actually invest in public services with the right type of financing schemes and so on. So that's without this is very typical EU, very specific to the European context, with this budgetary issue on deficits linked to the Treaty of Maastricht. You must know all this. So it's really like the importance of being able to invest in public services correctly, sustainably, and having a good financing system. All the work on all the challenge around how can you transform your local economy into a circular economy. That's really like about applying a new model, and COVID-19 has really shown that the trend is to, new models are emerging. New models can emerge and should be embraced, and the sort of donut economy or the circular economy, looking at resources in a different way, with more respect and so on, and in a circular way, not to waste anything, is really something that is at the heart of what cities are trying to push forward. Of course, the challenge of all the new sort of economic business models, like think of the sharing economy or the sort of the digital platforms and so on. That's a challenge. I mean, in Europe, there are still quite a big discussions going on with organizations like Uber or Airbnb in this respect, because there is a need to, for instance, the local authorities say we need much more cooperation with them in terms of using the data that they produce and so on. That there needs to be coordination. There needs to be a regulation on that. All the sort of negative impact of the work conditions coming from those platforms and so on. So yeah, that's a whole area of work that cities are really investing in. And yeah, and of course, something that is more linked to innovation, what technology is part, is really about nurturing a sort of local innovation ecosystems where you have all the different actors, institutions to generate innovation, knowledge and innovation, so that your helix, your sort of ecosystems with enterprises, with university, with the public sector, with citizens as well. But anyway, where these ecosystems can really create a prosperous city. And then, of course, a good city is a city that gives good conditions in terms of health to its inhabitants. So where, in terms of air, water, noise, pollution, this is huge problem. This is creating huge problems. Actually, the air pollution and the issue of pollution from CO2, carbon emissions, and so on. That's known everywhere. They also become a sort of reason for death now in the UK. This has been ruled. But noise is the second source of pollution in cities, and of course water being all the work on drinking water, on the right to water, and all these kind of things. This is a big challenge in cities, together with, of course, the aspects of waste and recycling, all the services that you can imagine around those areas. And a new, it's not new anymore really, but all the work done around the challenge of food systems, so food, how do you say, making sure, the urban organization of food chains and so on. So to make sure that in many, it's very transversal, the food policy, but having a local and city policy on food has become a very important challenge and important policy. Of course, if you think of health, also mobility, so really moving to a sustainable mobility, much more clean and active mobility. How do you push citizens? How do you change behaviors? How do you build cities that are not for cars but are for people? How do you make the cities much more fit for people that want to use soft modes and want to cycle? I mean, there's a huge amount of work on safety and trying to change plenty of directive on even trucks or cars or things like that, just to protect cyclists or people who walk and so on. So that's a big chunk of work on sustainable mobility. But of course, if you think of mobility also, how can we move to digital and automated mobility? That's a big area of let's say research still. That's it's a lot of experimentations there. And also, of course, in the clean mobility, of course, the electric mobility, there's still a lot to do. Maybe not in Canada, I don't know, but in Europe still, charging infrastructure, we're still backwards. And so how, a good city is a city that will allow much more electric cars. I mean, ideally no cars at all, but if the cars have to be, then they should be electric. And of course, streets for people, as I said before, so how to rethink space for people and not for cars. And a good city is also a vibrant city with a lot of culture, creativity, with spaces that are public, that are open, public spaces that are open, private spaces that are private buildings and so on that are rethought. All this new, I don't know if you've heard, all this new approach to the new Bauhaus initiative. So the idea of really combining a built environment that is beautiful, sustainable, and inclusive. So really a new approach to space in urban areas that is much more modern and innovative and healthy and positive for cities and for citizens and for people. And finally, of course, all the aspects of greening cities, which is linked to what I said before, but I mean, it's really, again, space. So how do you have bees in your urban areas? How do you have more trees and so on? So that's, if you want, these four elements are really about from the perspective, a good city from the perspective of citizens. Now, what are the conditions to do that in terms of what kind of administration you need? So from the local government perspective, a good city is also a good city that has a good administration. So an administration that is able to master global challenges. So what I was saying before, like, how can you fight inequalities as a big challenge? How are you able to master such a big challenge? Or climate change as a whole, how do you really embrace the energy transition, the ecological transition? What do you do as an administration? What do you need to do? What kind of policies? Can you be fit enough to be able to do that? And how do you wait in the governance of that at the global level? Yeah, so the sort of, even in migration, you have so much discussion, so many discussions on the compacts. I don't know if you have read the migration compact and so on. So how can cities really have a voice also in the global governance of such phenomena? And the same for climate change, as I said before, like the COP, the different COP on climate change, or even in the digital transformation as well. I mean, that's, how can you see digital rights, as civic rights in a way, but really looked at as a global, challenge. And finally is, as I said before, it's a city where the administration is fit for the present and for the future. So an administration that is resilient, that is able to react to the pandemic, is able to be innovative, not work in silos, is able to engage with citizens, is able to have a, push for a gender equality in the whole urban area, that is able to talk to the national level and to the European level in a sort of positive way and build a multi-level governance that is positive for the citizens and for the actors that are part of that. That is also working with the rural area around it, and that has a functional approach to its policies. And yeah, it's like a good governance, a new governance, a modern governance, an innovative governance, and government. And if you have that, then you can develop, systemic transformations and are able to build a good city. That's the way I would put together that.
It's fascinating to hear your description, Annalisa, and exciting too. I mean, the extent of the change which is happening in cities at the moment, the areas that they're working in, seems like a big change from the past, in the sense that there are so many things that are changing at once, and it all makes it sound a very exciting thing to be part of. You, as EUROCITIES, represent all these cities that are going through these, many changes. You represent them to the European institutions, and I'm interested in what the value is, or why a voice of the cities is important in the future of Europe. Why is it important that the cities themselves have a voice and are heard at the heart of the European institutions, as opposed to that job being done by the nation states. I have a sense that the cities have their own unique interests and perspective that will add value to Europe. I think it sounds like it will be very important. But I was interested in your view on that.
Yeah, it's a good question, because basically we spend a lot of time in trying to show the national governments that because, as you know, the European Union is not only made of the European Commission, who is a transnational body, and is a sort of, it's the EU government in a way. It's the one that writes, proposes policies and manages the money, let's say. But the real master is the council, is the member states. Yeah, so they are those that decide everything, those that push for whatever they want to push. So they are the real masters. There is no other word. And of course, they are not always very positive to cities because they are central government. So, it's very rare to find, even those mayors that move to, positions of ministers and so on, they always, then when they move, they always see things in a different way, and suddenly their former position, changes perspective and so on. It's another level of power. And it's so much bigger than, they suddenly think that cities are the same as trade unions, as, they put all the stuff, social partners, all the stakeholders, and so all together. And also, it is important to say that basically the urban element in the EU is not a treaty element. Yeah, it's not like the regional element is a treaty element. It also gave legitimacy to all the structural funds, the regional development funds, and so on. But there is this element of fighting regional disparities and so on. So there is a territorial component. While the member states have always said, no, urban is our thing, don't touch it, EU, stay out of it. It's our own cuisine, don't touch it. We do our own things with our cities, just give the money to us and we organize. And that's why, in the years, the European Union, if you want, never really developed a proper policy on urban. Like, you have a policy on environment, you have a common policy on agriculture, you have a common policy in terms of transport, there are many common policies. Urban, no. So this, I think, that's why, because of that, you've had cities going always, trying to have a dialogue directly with the European Commission, because they wouldn't be heard enough on European affairs by their national governments, because suddenly you have more politics, the national politics get into the game. But it must be the same in Canada or in the States and so on. So basically, we believe that there is, cities believe they have an important say in all European policy. Not in all, but in many European policies, because first of all, the majority of people live in urban areas or in metropolitan areas. So, the impact of those policies that will affect so many inhabitants is linked to cities, and specifically to urban authorities who will have to implement all the legislation and all the priorities and the policies that come from the EU. I'm thinking, environmentally speaking, energy speaking, mobility speaking, all these aspects are all then translated into policy and legislation that local authorities will have to implement, like on air quality and so on. So if they are not built from the beginning with the local authorities, it doesn't make sense, because very often we've seen how incoherent they become when they have to be translated at the local level. And so why lose all that when you can, avoid it by working with them in the first place? And so that's what we're pushing for. And that's where we think we have a role to play that is totally complementary and adds value to the national as well. And in other ways, and also I think cities are much more ambitious in many ways and on many policies. So I think that for the sort of European ambition, for instance, in climate change or other things, working with cities, it's much more, how do you say, inspiring than with ministers or ministries or the national government, who are much more stuck with other issues and maybe other vested interests and so on. So it's, working with cities is a source of progress for the European Union, for Europe. So that's why. And also, I mean, last but not least, definitely, it's because cities are democratic bodies that are, representing citizens. So if you work with cities, it's like working with citizens. I mean, more and more cities are, complementing their sort of representative democracy element with participatory aspects, as participatory tools, and that gives them even more legitimacy to represent their local reality, their local communities, vis-a-vis the European Union and the European policies, much more than national governments. So, yeah, that's why. I mean, there is a wealth of experience, in terms of co-creating policy solutions and, that meet local needs across Europe in cities. So this is an intelligence that needs to go up, and cities can be the vehicle for that. So I don't know if I answered.
Yes, you did, very clear,
questions.
very clearly. Because what you seem to be saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying is that cities are where things happen, where the people who are responsible for putting policies that might be developed on a European level or a national level that are good ideas, it's the people in the cities who have got to say, well, that's a good idea, but we have to work out how this is going to be practical and how this is going to happen. At the same time, they're also the people who have got a very good awareness of the issues and challenges that are being faced by the citizens and can reflect that also to the institutions. I mean, your description of this does make cities seem like a very exciting place to be if you're interested politically and in making cities and making life a better thing. I mean, the role of cities and the job that you're able to do there seems to be a very attractive one. I was interested in what you said also about democracy and the participative forms of democracy that are being discussed and implemented in cities today too, which of course is very important given the challenges that democracy as a whole are facing in many countries around the world.
Yes. Yeah, there are many experiments in terms of democracy that via citizens engagement that cities are pushing forwards through platforms. There's a very interesting experience in Madrid with this Decide Madrid. I don't know if you know it. It gives citizens really the power to propose new initiatives and have a say on ongoing projects. Or we have a group called Creative Citizenship and another one, Digital Citizenship, that really goes in that direction and collects all the tools and the tools, methodologies, and ways in which cities are experimenting in these fields, also with participatory budgeting, for instance. It's not very easy, but it does happen more and more, and it becomes better and better from the very beginning when it started. Like the one in Paris, it's quite interesting, and really tries to move away from your traditional political cycle in which citizens are engaged only before the election period and so on. So yeah, it's and in this respect, the digital tools can help a lot. Of course, it does have it does have some drawbacks, or at least challenges, because the digital tools and all the infrastructures that is around them, and above all the digital skills that have to go with it, can constitute a sort of divide, digital divide between those that have them and those that have not. So yeah, that's why cities are investing a lot in developing digital skills. It's if you look at Barcelona, it's really like a city that invests a lot in that, so that everyone can have access and the right. Again, I go back to this idea of, digital right as really citizens' rights. And cities do it in different ways. They partner up with networks, with institutes, with businesses, with schools, and they work together to make this happen, and to have free tools and training and everything like that. But okay, I just went a bit deeper into that.
Well, I was gonna, that was gonna be my next question, really around the impact that technology is having now inside cities, and how it might influence the lives of citizens in the future. You've talked a bit about that in terms of, bridging the digital divide, enabling people, or ensuring that everyone's got access to the benefits that technology might bring and the things that cities might do with it. But could you talk a little bit more about what cities will be doing with technology and how that will be impacting the lives of their citizens?
Yeah, well, I think that the pandemic, technology was used before more and more, but you've seen how the boost that it's had with the pandemic is it's huge. But there have been lessons in this respect, and it's really made so clear and evident that technology is much more than what we thought. Can do much more than we thought. It's become like oxygen in a way. Like we
Yes.
need it for anything, medication, food, social life, food. Sometimes if you are in a lockdown, you need it for food. You need for everything. So it's a tool, but it's still a tool. It's a must. It pushes the look, but it's still a tool. So it's important that still you put cities at the center of it, citizens at the center of it, the users at the center of it, in terms of, also protecting them, making sure that, there are no abuse and so on. But it's just to go back to your question, because otherwise I go to another direction. But moving all the public services online, so that's a huge new areas. It's given a boost. It was already there, but it's really like how it's a new e-government transition, basically. So, but how, how do you also help? You're not only useful in terms of because it's a pandemic time, but it's also because you have less reduced administrative burdens that are completely unnecessary and can be avoided, and that administrative procedures are stupidly so much time consuming. So a big boost there, I think, will happen. It's a big trend. So it's a trend that has accelerated during the pandemic, with services like, permits and things like that, but also full library access or visits to public museums, that have moved online. So it's not only public services in the sense of, your strict administrative life, or, basic needs, but it's also like your leisure life, or other. They are also basic needs, but you see what I mean. It's really everything, basically. And I think an important trend that is emerging is the use of artificial intelligence to really plan urban space, to, for instance, manage traffic flows, use sensors to detect when it's the right time to collect the waste, or monitor air pollution levels, things like that. You really, or yeah, for instance, there's this new invention that has been proposed by a university in Pisa that is looking at trees, or planting trees, but also they are smart trees that are able also to capture the carbon dioxide and also measure the level of pollution and so on. So yeah, it's really like touching so much more than before. So this trend has how do you say, exploded. So yeah, I think administrations are also embracing that, but of course they are much more aware than maybe other actors of also the sort of risks, and are also paying a lot of attention on, to the sort of risks or challenges and so on. There's a very interesting. I suggest all of you to maybe go to see what the Coalition for Digital Rights does. It's quite an interesting area of work, a group of cities that are working in that direction.
With that, you talked about the challenges of technology. Data has been an issue that people have had degrees of concern around, that it creates opportunities in cities, helps cities to manage and provide services and many other things. But also there are the challenges of the collection of citizen data and the management of that. And you talked a little bit about the Coalition for Digital Rights. We would have an interest in this area. But can you talk about, how cities might deal with these challenges?
Yeah, sure. Of course, data is again another. It's in the mouth of everyone. It's so important in the good and in the bad. But yeah, of course, data offers many possibilities, right? It helps cities to better understand citizens' needs and also but not in a Big Brother sense. Really, to be able to then choose and implement, the right strategies and policies, and allocate the resources effectively. So they, like in traffic, in city operations, to have a better insight into city operations, also to promote transparency, to encourage innovation, in new services and apps, new apps, completely new apps. So yeah, that they all, leverage on data, they all leverage data. So data can be useful in many fields. And I think urban mobility is one of the biggest, I would say, giving, the chance to cities to create those tools that can really improve the transport of the citizens. I mean, I think it's in every city is being used in that way, and quite effectively. We have lots of examples. So that's the good side of that. Now, as you were saying, there are lots of challenges, because there is there is this issue of privacy, of control over your own personal data, because if you sometimes you don't even know. I mean, the majority of people don't even know that their data is being used. So both in physical and virtual places. So, how can you ensure digital confidentiality? How do you ensure security, dignity? Because that's also very important, and anonymity, of course. I think, and that's the coalition of citizens' rights as well. I mean, of digital rights. I mean, citizens that provide data, their own personal information, they have the right to know what happens, what can happen to their data, how it is used, for what purposes. And so there's a real need to respect the rights of citizens in this respect, as I said before. So the anonymity, the transparency, the control, So both in terms of the means that are used and the data that is collected. So, if you do it in a, if you do it, if an administration does it in a resilient way, investing in infrastructures and focusing on the privacy of data by design, then it's good. So, we have identified citizens' data principles, that recognize that the data that is generated in public spaces is a public asset, and provides a necessary starting point for more socially responsible access to the data and use of the data by public, but also especially by private actors. So yeah, as I said before, I think it's really like the Coalition for Digital Rights is a very good place to go and look if you are interested in terms of transparency and all the sort of these rights behind the digital world, and also smart cities, because we talk a lot about smart cities, but that element is sometimes not always very clear.
How are cities going to be impacted by COVID-19? What might it change what cities look like, what they do? What is the influence? What are cities going to be like after COVID-19?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, the big question is, we are very much asked this question, is like, will cities survive? Will we survive? Yes, I think yes. I mean, I don't see cities disappearing and so on, because no. But it's true that, it seems difficult to imagine that they can bounce back to what it was before. So it's really, so yeah, what mayors have been saying is that at the end of the day, this pandemic is nothing special, in the sense that it's made a lot of things worse, but it's basically exposed, x-rayed the issues and the problems that were already there. So the problem is not the pandemic. The problem is was the model we had, and we still have in a way, before, and that the pandemic has, completely accelerated, made everything worse. Yeah. So anyway, what we can see from COVID is that many citizens are, so pain and injustice in a way. So many citizens are suffering and will continue to suffer from the pandemic, from the economic aggravation. So in a way, cities can be, the place where a new generation of citizen support and solidarity and civic approach can emerge. And I think that's something that we have seen. As I said before, the pandemic has shown that a lot of the old models and patterns, are not working, so they need to be changed. And that's why, there are shifts that are, in place, both at the global scale, but in cities. And there are shifts in so many aspects of life, of course, work, travel, place. And so all these changes need to be tracked, and new models have to be thought. And that's why, the donut economy or other models that are, cities are coming up with all these sort of new models, are very interesting to track and to look at, to be scaled up. And then for me, the life after COVID is a life where it's really important to find a way forward that doesn't allow populism to find its way. It's so easy for media and certain voices to spread panic and find, the simplistic solutions and scapegoats. And so, communication, reassuring people, situation will be okay, not be okay, but if they give some responsibility to themselves as well in changing their behaviors and in being, in improving, the way we live, it's a good way forward. So I think that cities in this respect, in this context, they can, improve and therefore be a booster even more than before, to improve the city and work with the citizens to how to, improve economic models, ways of living, and so on, and in that way even deepen democracy. They can experiment, as I said, with new models, with innovations, with the digital. It's really the time to embrace change, positive change, and make changes that, of course, are important now, but they can make sense in the long term and then can have a positive impact in the long term. So, yeah, I think this is what I would say. Yeah, I mean, we don't know what the post-pandemic will be like, but it's part of our own responsibility of each of us to make it a better place.
I just have two final questions, and the first one is around the way that EuroCities uses technology to help cities to work more effectively together. I know you do that, and it'd be interesting to hear a bit more about it.
Yeah, of course we do that. As I said at the very beginning, we do promote a collaborative way of working, especially by physical meeting. Now we've transformed everything online, so we use technology 100% at the moment. So that's how we use it. We use it through online meetings, basically. So we are basically the whole day on Teams. And we support sessions of capacity building, of knowledge sharing, of, again, as I said before, advocacy towards the European Commission on different aspects. And yeah, as I said, it's really like improving also maybe the networking aspects, because that is the big added value of EuroCities for its members, is to be able to be in contact all the time, and also informally, and having a safe space to exchange and to also exchange on frustrations and problems and so on, not only communicate externally and so on. And we have we have some work in progress on a membership platform that will allow this networking collaboration to be more effective, and and do that. But of course we hope that at least once to 3 times a year we will be able again to meet in different communities, because I think people are starting to to be tired and to miss the sort of more informal exchange in human terms.
It sounds like after COVID, when online is combined with the ability to meet face to face, your community is going to be stronger after all the things that have been created during COVID.
That's true. One thing I wrote in one of my editorial is that we have a foundation that is 35 years old of physical meetings, which allows us today to go through this. And this is making us even stronger, because if we are strong now that we have the so difficult conditions, we will be even stronger.
Absolutely. My last question is one I ask everybody I talk to, but it is the advice that you would give to the students who are watching this and will be graduating soon. They'll be going off to their careers. And really, what type of advice would you want to leave them with and for them to think about as they move on with their lives?
Yeah, well, it's difficult because also I don't know the context there, but I mean, I would say stay human. So really look for the human element still in every job you make, in every job you will find. I think empathy, the human understanding how other people are being and working and living and so on is a fundamental skill to learn and to have and to apply in your life and in your career. Because leadership based on empathy, I think, is the new type of leadership that is important in this period. And more specifically, I would say invest in the public sector. Don't just run away to the private sector or to those sectors that will pay you more and so on. Be some sort of pioneer of the public sector transformation. We need it. We need it for the public good. We need it to transform society. We need to transform cities in this respect, if we're talking about local administrations and so on, for the better. I think, be agents of change for the public good. And so be patient. If the bureaucracy scares you, or transform it, make it your own thing, your own mission to take it to the moon, and to transform it into a future fit administration, into an innovative and creative administration. Because in the end of the day, administrations are made of people, and people can change.
What wonderful advice. It hopefully will be inspiring.
I hope it's useful.
Well, I think inspiring for the people who will watch it. Certainly, as I've had this discussion with you, I come out of it more excited about the possibilities of cities, and the potential for having a real impact on people's lives and improving the world. And for that to come in a short space of time in one discussion says that your ability to advocate on behalf of the cities is a very good thing, and it's been great to talk to you. Thank you for doing this, Annalisa.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm very, very privileged. I feel very privileged, and I hope it will be useful. And as I said, do not hesitate to contact me or my colleagues for further questions or follow-ups. We will be very happy to go on. And we've worked with Toronto on migration and integration, but I mean, it'd be great to work with other cities and so on. So who knows? But thank you very much, and good luck this afternoon.